Okay, if you're in Philly and one name comes to mind, who is it?
This is Auto Collabs.
Don Johnson.
What?
Okay. Oh, you didn't give any other quality. I could be.
I said if you're in Philly and a name comes, like I think of the craziest stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, lots of names coming to my mind everywhere. I don't have to be somewhere for a name.
Okay. And what's if you were to personify the overall energy of Philly in one word, what would you say?
The Roots.
The Roots. Okay.
Nightly news.
You know, I'm doing this just because I know you are. I'm doing this because I know where he wants us to go.
I know where we're going. Like,
well, let me put you on the spot one further since we're a minute into this intro. Where do I want you to go?
He wants us to be at the top of the Rocky Steps is exactly where he wants us to be.
No, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. You're wrong, and you'll realize this. No, but Philadelphia is definitely a city that is full of people that have just grit and just get to work day in and day out, right? Yeah, there's some, even the stories that have made it out of Philly, right? Like Rocky, some like the Founding Fathers, little stuff like that. It really is just little things stuff like that. But it really, the essence of Philly is really people that just show up every day and they just keep moving forward and they keep moving forward. And today's guest, Anthony Jingoli from Effectv, just reminds me of that mentality. Like he's from Philly and like he just reminds me of so many of the hardworking people that I know from the city from growing up there. And it's like not a ton of fanfare, right? But dedicated, consistent, keep swinging the bat day in and day out. And just for some reason, they're always standing still. Like they always just have another round in them. So that's where I was going with all that, gentlemen.
Really, the whole intro was not dedicated to Anthony. It was dedicated to Paul being like, and I'm from Philly too, right?
Do I talk about that?
Did that happen?
Let's see how much I know about Philly.
But he stayed and I left.
One day Cirillo's going to be like, let me tell you about Texas. He's going to be like,
he's going to be like, let me tell you about Canada.
Well, hey, look, with all of that said, we really hope that you enjoy this episode and our conversation with Anthony Jingoli. All right, we are hanging out with Anthony Jingoli. I'm pretty sure I got that right. I think I've said it on camera a few times now. The regional director of Auto for Effectv, and he is actually in Philly, where we will be very shortly.
Center of the universe.
Thanks for joining us, man.
I'm happy to be here. I'm patiently waiting for everybody to arrive because I think this is going to be such a fantastic event. So it's a great city, and everybody's going to have a great time in the city, and then they get to learn a little bit about automotive along the way. So it's should be fantastic.
And what we found out is you're going to be patiently waiting for Cirillo for a long time because he just started walking. He's actually in front of a green screen. He didn't book his flights in time.
He was like, "This is in person? I thought it was virtual."
So much.
Well, Anthony, so being from Philly, give us real quick before we get into the real thing, because we don't get to talk to people that are on boots on ground where a SoduCon is going to be held that often. Like if people are coming to Philly and we know that their schedule is going to be packed with a SoduCon, but if they had like 1 hour to do one thing, what would you recommend that they make sure that they don't leave Philly without doing?
Ooh. All right, so that's a great question because there's so many things. But here's what I'd say: given when everybody's coming in, if they're flying in Sunday. And this is my Italian's going to come out a little bit here, but everybody's staying in South Philly. Go to the Italian market. It's like a 10-block market with everything you could imagine and want from a standpoint for any kind of food or delicacy from an Italian standpoint is there. So if it's a nice day, you could take a walk. You can go see it. Pat's and Gino's butt up against it. So that would be a good little excursion.
That's where I'm going.
And with that, we're gonna need some new moderators and podcast hosts because it sounds like Cirillo is gone.
I'm just gonna be you're gonna find me asleep on a bed of like fresh bread.
Cannolis and fresh bread. Cannoli for a pillow.
That's unbelievable.
That's good. I didn't know what you were going to say. I was wondering because, like, you know, obviously there's the touristy things. You know, it's like, oh, you're going to have them go to the Rocky Steps. You're going to have them go to Liberty Bell. But the Italian market is literally the thing you don't see on TV.
Yep.
That is one of the most enjoyable parts of Philadelphia. If you want to get a handle for, like, the culture and the quality of the food, and, like, now I want to go.
Yeah.
And wait, is it nearby?
It's actually not that far. It's not that far from Sioka Subaru.
No,
It's not that far.
That's
Field
great.
trip. Yeah.
Yep.
Field trip. All right. Well, let's get into it. I'd love to take a little trip down memory lane because, you know, most people, when they think about Comcast or Effectv, it's kind of the kind of person over there or the team over there or the company over there that everybody knows a little bit about but not enough about, but I think getting to know the people within organizations is always a lot of help for me, at least. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your history in automotive. Have you always been on the media side, or has it been kind of something that you've been around different parts of the automotive ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, my journey into automotive is it's not traditional, but it's in the sense of I've been with Comcast for over 20 years. I spent a long time here, and I've moved in throughout a lot of different roles. And I started out in marketing and branding, so that's at my heart. That's what I am. But I took a business development role that was very focused on tier 2 automotive. About midway through my time here, and I got to spend a lot of time with dealers and dealer group presidents, providing additional value. They would buy television and use us for all the power of the sight, sound, and motion. But then we would come up with other ways to push the brand out there for a tier 2. And we did some really creative and fun things. Like we did something awesome with Toyota called Haul Away Hunger, where it's really their event, but we brought it to life with video, and it's about 75 Tundras heading down Columbus Boulevard, packed with food that gets delivered to fill abundance. And we would kind of partner with these groups and bring these things to life and put them on television and put them into video. And getting into that community and starting to kind of feel that was pretty powerful. And then as we kept adjusting our business model, the opportunity to get into tier 3 came. And it was something that I jumped at because of the dynamics I had working with these dealers and seeing what they did in the community and what they wanted to do with their brand and how passionate they were, not just about automotive, but about the economy around them. And it really kind of drove me. So I stepped into this role in about 2017 and have been much more focused on tier 3 and helping to lead our teams be a valuable solution provider to dealers all across our company.
So being at Effectv or Comcast for 20 years, like if people just put on a little like thinking caps real quick, you've been at a media organization that's focused on TV and video since before iPhones existed, right? Mm-hmm. So the amount of change in the way that the company and maybe you even interact with advertising or with long form or short term video must have been, I mean, you've been through all of the changes from moving to, streaming services and YouTube and OTT and all these different types of video inputs that we now have in our life that we didn't have in 2002, right? Mm-hmm. What's been like, maybe talk about like the most significant changes and the way that you've had to approach them as an employee, like at your personal level, as those changes have happened.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I've gone in my career from being sort of the disruptor to being cable when it was on the come, and it was, all these shows popping in reality TV, and everybody wanted to be on cable, and our inventory was growing, and people wanted to advertise there, and we were disrupting the traditional television model. And then you fast forward, and TV changes, right? And it becomes a different dynamic, and now there's people disrupting us and forcing us to change our perspective on things. And I think that's been, if there's any one thing, it's that you have to keep evolving and learning. And I think what Comcast does such a great job of is staying ahead of the curve on what's happening next. They're planning for what's happening because we understand what our consumers want, and we continue to pivot sort of our cable business, our video business, to support consumers and what their needs are. And then advertising is able to follow past that. So I think it's been an interesting dynamic of being sort of on top of the world and then being the one that everybody's coming after, and then having to kind of catch back up, because we went through a phase where, we had to get smarter and provide better resources, because digital came into focus and did a really good job of showing data and different things. So it's been good for us. But I've gotten to see both sides of it, and it's definitely been an interesting ride, that's for sure.
So it's like from disruptor to disrupted.
Yep.
It's like basically that swing. So you remember being the disruptor part. There's usually a little more ego involved when you're the disruptor, right?
Yeah.
Like being a humble disruptor.
Yeah.
is they're not two things that you usually hear together. Although I think that you find a humble disruptor and you have a really great thing. Back in when you were disrupting traditional media, what was the main value proposition?
I think it was geography. It was the biggest thing. We had geography, and we could bring different kinds of audiences. So it went from the traditional broadcast model was one network, and a lot
everybody
of
sees the same thing, right?
Correct. And we had zones, so you could advertise in different zones. So you'd have to buy a whole DMA. You could buy a smaller area, maybe just your county. So that was very interesting to a dealer who didn't want to advertise down at the shore when they were in, West Philadelphia. Yeah. So there was that part. And then we had all these networks that we were partnering with, ESPN, HGTV, Food Network, that could define certain kinds of audiences. And now it was easier to find your sort of niche customer, depending on what kind of business you were. So I think those were the things that really set us apart out of the gate. And then there was just an influx of viewership there. And then that just carried us through.
So what lessons do you feel like you've carried through being on the other end of it? Like now you're on the other side of it, right? Mm-hmm. And you're obviously making a real sophisticated and savvy push, with digital. But where do those two things connect? Your experience on the one end and now your experience on this end.
Yeah, I think it's about, I said a little bit earlier, evolving and learning. I think we got to a point where we realized we really have to kind of lean in and figure out what we can do better. We can't just ride this sort of wave any longer. And again, Comcast was doing a lot of those things, but as an advertising business, we had to come around to that and say, okay, we have to provide more service, more value. That's part of what that business development role was. It was bringing more value to dealers and dealer groups. But then it was, we have to do even more than that, and we have to do it faster. We're a big company, so we had to learn how to get quick. And I think that's that point of inflection of, it's not just enough to do more for dealers. We have to do it faster, and we have to do really unique things. And not only do we have to catch up, but we got to pass the curve. And I think that's what we're set up to do now. But we had to take some time getting there, but we made it through. And all along, there was still a lot of value we provided. But now I think we can do even more. And that's kind of been the critical piece for me.
You know what I love about this? It really, it does two things for me. It emphasizes the point that when something first comes out, it never actually ends up the way we all anticipate. So for example, when Web 2 was really like the big, and we're like, oh man, this is going to kill every type of media that came before it. The second thing it emphasizes is that given enough time, we realize that this isn't going to kill something like TV or radio. We could just digitize it. Radio, isn't that a podcast? Like, my kids don't listen to radio, they listen to podcasts. My kids don't watch TV, they watch YouTube, they watch Netflix, they watch all the, Amazon, whatever. But that's still TV to them, and it's still radio to them. So we can just evolve it. But to the point of, evolving and things not ending up, like I look at radio was supposed to kill newsprint. TV was supposed to kill, radio was supposed to kill the theater. TV was supposed to kill the radio, and the internet was supposed to kill it all. And yet here we are. It looks vastly different on how we use this medium to communicate and aligning with you. But in that evolution that you're kind of talking about, going from disruptor to disruptee and then maybe into disruptor again, is there a mindset shift that needs to happen on part of the person producing the ads or creating the advertising to fit these new mediums?
Yeah, definitely. I think, but at its source, it's kind of still the same thing, right? It's sight, sound, motion. You're telling a story, and that doesn't change. And you're using video to tell the story. So now there's much more sophisticated ways to target that story to different audiences. But good storytelling is good storytelling. A good show produced in 1980 for broadcast TV is still a good show. It still, tells great stories. So I think there's a tenet to it, and what these things tend to come back around again too. Like we saw this with, everything went streaming and people said they're going to watch on their tablets and their phones, but we see 83% of all viewing still happens on a big screen because we just put all those apps on a TV. And people said, okay, nobody wants to have all of these networks in a bundle. They just want to watch what they want. But now there's all these streaming services.
Going right back. Right.
That's been my favorite new thing. Someone's like, I'm a cord cutter. And they're like, yeah, I got the Apple thing and the ESPN thing.
But that came packaged with the Disney Plus.
And, now I got Hulu for an extra $3.99.
I never watch it, but I got it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's wild. That's hilarious. Yeah, so actually, no, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say,
oh no, I just had to throw myself in.
Michael just wanted to throw his 2 cents into the mix.
Yep.
There really is. I think that's the benefit of experience, right? You can look and you can take a more measured step, because if you haven't been through a disruption, haven't been through a major transition, right? Like a generational transition once every 20 years, right? It feels like the transitions are getting a little faster between technologies, but I don't know. I think 20 years is still kind of a thing, and if you can kind of see through a generation, the big things that happen, you have the benefit of being able to measure your first step, right? Without feeling the need. We see that a lot in the markets today. A lot of young investors, a lot of first-time retail investors have never seen a downturn. So then when all of a sudden the market turned, there was no exposure to that. So everybody panics, right? And you get this really crazy volatility. So with experience, you do have the benefit of saying like, hold on a second. Let's just wait and see if he zigs or zags before we have to like go all the way in. So, I mean, I just see that as a massive benefit of being through it once or twice.
Yeah.
At this
point. It was critical for what we just went through, because there's a lot of dealers that weren't advertising as much, and we had to kind of work our way through that and figure it out. And we still are. I mean, we consistently hear, listen, I'm not going to advertise. I don't have any inventory. And that's great. But our question now is, but do you have customers? Because if you do, let's go tell a story, because you're going to need to be in front of them one way or another, because cars will come back, but you need to keep your brand out there. So we're trying to kind of be sensitive to what they're going through and understand it. But also remind them that your brand's important, and you should be present even through these tough times, so that when you come out of it, you have the ability to take a little more market share or have a little bit more brand recognition in the marketplace.
Also, could you love yourself a little less? I mean, we don't have inventory. Yeah, but do you still exist? What do you mean? What are we advertising? The thing a 4-year-old knows that you sell? I just want to underscore this. I just got off a call with 2 colleagues in South Africa, and they were enlightening me on the South African retail industry, where the German manufacturers have had an agency model there for 5 years, where the lead time, regardless of chip shortage, like we're talking about normal times, lead time on a vehicle is 6 months or more.
Whoa.
They really shone a spotlight on the importance of marketing you, not the car, and how it's always been that way. But here we are in the United States, where we think we're the only ones experiencing. We are at such an early phase of inventory shortage and don't have things on the lot and yada, yada, yada. But what you just said made me think about how important it is that if you've put all of the onus on the fact that you don't have inventory, you are really undermining who you are as a person and why people are coming to you to buy a vehicle in the first place.
That's crazy.
Well, and not just that, but you're undermining the value of your customer too, right?
Right.
So like if you're placing a higher level of value on a single piece of inventory than you are the value of a customer, being sticky to your brand.
Well, it's the relationship, the connection, all of it.
They don't like me. It's just because I have a Suzuki on the lot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the truth. If you think about like how with your 6-month comment, if you like kind of use that as the benchmark and you say, well, how would you market yourself right now if you knew you didn't have a product to sell for 6 months?
Right.
What would you talk about? What would you say, knowing that you will have the product
Mm-hmm.
6 months from now and it will be ready to sell and there's somebody going, what would you do? What would you say?
Yeah.
So Anthony, are you seeing a shift in the way that because you're telling like, hey, tell a story. Are you seeing a shift in the type of content that advertisers are placing on ad platforms, or is it still so dependent on inventory that advertisers are still only putting one type of content piece out there, or are you seeing a shift in the type of content?
It's a little bit of both. I think the dealers that leaned in and get branding and understand that they want to be in front of their customer because they want to drive a lifetime value of that customer and maybe not just one transaction, they are telling that story. Maybe not as deeply as we want, but they've shifted and they've stayed in front of their customer base. I think the co-op programs drive a lot of sticker price and some of those old habits that the money that we need to sort of bring in to pay for the advertising is driven by rules that require that. So it makes it a little harder to do that. So it'd be interesting to see if OEMs begin to evolve some of that on behalf of their dealers. But I think there is, and I think it's a good sign because I think dealers have an opportunity right now because the consumers understood what happens at a dealership for the most part. I get my car serviced, I buy a car. The dealers haven't had to educate a lot on how that works. Where we're moving, they're going to need to educate consumers again. The consumers are going to want to feel comfortable around EVs. They want to understand the dynamics of it, the logistics of it. Digital retailing is a new way of buying a car. They're going to need to learn and understand. And I think having trust out there, and a lot of times your commercial, your advertising is the first impression you make on any consumer. So if they feel trust in that and they know that, hey, I'm going to lean into an EV and this dealer's taught me about it, so I'm going to go learn some more from them. That creates this dynamic that they haven't had for a long time. And I think that they can go and tell some new stories that they haven't had the opportunity to tell for a few years now.
I love that. I wanna just key in on one thing that we haven't talked about because I think it's important. Early you said like as you were moving into cable, it was the ability to go from a linear like very broad reach, like targeting, you're only talking the city, to you went down to zones. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, because I think still a lot of people, when they think about a TV or a cable advertiser, they just still think they think kind of legacy now, which is zone buys and zone bids. But from what I understand, you guys at Effectv are actually going even deeper with the type of data and audience structures that you have, that you've actually innovated at that level as well, allowing dealers to maybe put these stories in front of even a better audience. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of those audiences?
Yeah, I think you set it up perfectly in that we were able to kind of shrink the geographies even more, so we can go down to a zip code level, especially with digital. So we can hone in on that. But then we really started to get more precise with the audiences because of our set-top box data. So we can aggregate the viewership data to be able to say, okay, people that buy Hondas have these viewing habits, so let's go match commercials to those viewing habits. So now not only are you in the geography that's in your backyard that's going to drive the most value into your dealership, but you're talking to the people that are more likely to buy your car. And you're doing that not just at the bottom of the funnel, but you're teeing up this whole, we've talked about the flywheel in the past. You're bringing in these customers no matter what their need is, based on that time. So if you need to drive a service message when you don't have inventory, you can go out and do that in the geography that matters, and then tee up and bring those customers into your dealership, nurture them. And then when they're ready to buy new cars, when they're ready to do trade-ins, they're there for you. So we've gotten a lot better at bringing those insights and that first party data that Comcast has, it's so rich, and using it to help dealers inform their campaigns and be much more targeted than they've ever been for a mass medium.
Wow.
Anthony, we're going to be at a SodaCon on the ground not too long from now. It's really cool that it's your hometown. What is the Effectv team looking to get out of a SodoCon and just involvement in events like this?
Yeah, I think it's education. We talked about that evolution. Like I'm coming ready to listen and learn and to talk to people about partnerships. Like we're in a space, right? We're not a pure automotive company, right? We live automotive because it's such a big part of our business. But I'm coming to learn and hear who we can talk to about partnering and finding other ways, because we have all this robust data and this robust distribution platform. If we can have that be more influenced and educated by things that are in auto, everybody wins in that space. So I think from that standpoint, I'm really interested to just talk to people that I probably shouldn't even be talking to. I should be talking to dealers, but what kind of partnerships are out there and what opportunity is out there for us to make what we provide better, in the hopes that makes the experience for a dealer much better.
Well, Anthony, it was so much fun. Oh, he got the horn.
We never had the trigger pad on this, but that just got me fired up, because I'm thinking, every collaborator that ever comes to an event is like, how do I find new contracts with dealers? Which I know that's an intentionality, and we want to connect dealers and industry partners together, but there's so much that can be gained from other industry partners or OEM representatives understanding the network and the inclusivity, that if we bring everyone together, that everything just goes faster and further from an innovation perspective.
Yeah, I would argue that having Anthony's focus is actually one that will yield better, long-lasting results when it comes to connecting with the right customers who get what you do fully, right? Not a churning customer, but someone who understands why the value proposition is a good fit. Anthony, thank you so much for sharing some of your stories from Disruptor to Disrupted, and on the way back to Disruptor. On behalf of Kyle Mountsier, Michael Cirillo, and myself, thanks for being on Auto Collabs.
I'm always interested in learning from somebody who's kind of like boots on the ground, has experience in what we've all kind of referred to as the traditional way of doing things, and interested in seeing how that bridges the gap. And of course, Anthony joined us and gave us some historical insight, but also how it is incredibly feasible to take a medium that we all know and love and know how to use and turn it into something modern. What was your take on that?
Well, for me, this, I extrapolate this straight to broader automotive, right?
Right.
Is that like when you think about, your Henry Ford, or even like the 70s and 80s of automotive, like super disruptive, extremely innovative, and then a phase of like, vehicles just exist to get back and forth to work, to, hey, look, this can be, again, a disruptive, innovative, source of pop culture. And to see a company like Effectv or Comcast, who now, again, it's mind-boggling to me that in a 20-year time frame, we can have a company go from oh my goodness, look at what they're doing, to get off of cable, right? No,
Right.
Only over here. And so, for a company like that to kind of give us an insight into what it looks like to move back in the disruptor phase. I mean, at the end, he was talking about how much data they have access to and the way that they're doing audience data. I mean, it's just as dialed in as many social media or Google ad platform data centers. And so, finding that as inspiration from a broader automotive perspective to say, hey, look, if a big company like that, publicly traded company like that can do it, then anybody, in any retail business can take those bumps and bruises and make shifts to go to innovative disruptor again.
One of my favorite things about what he said was when he kind of distilled everything down. We were talking about the different delivery methods of the message, what kind of screens it shows up on. And he says, in the end, it's sight, sound, and motion. I really love that, because regardless of the platform you're on, regardless of the distribution method, the sights, the sounds, and the motion has to be compelling. It has to connect, or it is equally ineffective as any other medium. So I use the word effective in that, not intentionally. But all that being said, we had a great time with Anthony. And so on behalf of my non-Philly born and bred co-hosts, Michael Cirillo and Kyle Mountsier, thank you so much for joining us on Auto Collabs.
Welcome to Auto Collapse. Why are we recording?